Welcome back. Your time is 10:13. We all know the importance of adoption, the impact that it has on families as well as these children. And joining us this morning is Nicole Witt. She is the executive director of the Adoption Consultancy and host of Adopting the Podcast. So good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me back.
Yeah, well, we're so glad to have you because we think this topic obviously is very important. And those who maybe are considering adopting right now, maybe have thought about it. What is the first step that they really need to take? And if they still maybe are on the fence, have some questions, where do they need to go as far as these resources?
Yeah, well, the first step is really figuring out what kind of adoption you're interested in, because those are going to lead to very different paths, whether it's domestic adoption of a newborn, international adoption of a toddler, or foster adoption of maybe an older child. So that's really the very first decision to make. And there are people out there who can certainly help with that, from therapists and counselors who are experts in adoption to adoption consultants like myself.
And, I think you kind of bring in a good point. The fact that, maybe back in the day, a lot of people had children at a young age, but a lot of people are waiting now until they have their career in place. They're waiting a little bit longer to make that decision. And I think that's when they have, like you said, some choices to make, is if you are going to adopt a newborn, maybe an older child, a teenager. So where do you start? What is the first step? I know I kind of already asked you, like, the resources that you need to take. But when should you start maybe considering adoption?
Yeah, and I think you're right. People have delayed childbearing, and I think they are often a bit surprised where maybe they try to start later and then they don't have the results that they're looking for. So sometimes they're a little bit blindsided and they haven't really been thinking about adoption for all that long. And it's sort of a new world that they need to figure out how to navigate. But basically, once they've made that decision about which path to pursue, that's going to dictate who they should go with, right? If they're interested in foster adoption, their local child services office is the best place. If they're interested in international adoption, an agency is the best place. And then for private adoption of a newborn, they have some options there: agencies, attorneys, consultants. But they should just start reaching out to a variety of people and interviewing them and talking to them, and start getting a sense of where they feel more comfortable. And that will kind of guide them into which approach may work best for them.
Yeah, and this, as I mentioned, it has an impact on not only these children, these families as well, especially those families who may struggle themselves to have children. So I think this is a great avenue that people can really go down, and they can make those decisions along the way, find, that perfect little human that they can bring into their lives, whether that be young or old. And what is your kind of thoughts on that, as far as those who are maybe trying to make that decision? Do I keep trying, or is adoption a good route for me?
Yeah, I love that the stigma that used to be associated with adoption really isn't there anymore, so that adoption can sort of be at the table of those conversations early on.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the key thing, because before, a lot of people would kind of go to step one, step two, step three, and adoption was almost seen as a last resort in some ways, or second best. And then by the time people got to it, they were exhausted, emotionally, financially, physically, and sometimes that prevented them from pursuing adoption. So I think that's really important, that adoption is part of the conversation early on, with all of the other ways of building families: conceiving naturally, IVF, egg donor, sperm donor, embryo donor, surrogacy, and figure out, go through the pros and cons. What is the right approach for each family? Where is the best place to spend my resources that's likely to lead to the outcome that I'm looking for, so that you don't get to that point and suddenly find out that those resources have been expended, again, whether it's emotion, time, money. So just having, realizing what all the options are right from the beginning and figuring out which makes the most sense for you is a much more effective way for families to approach it.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you taking the time. I've heard so many great stories, so many great adoption stories. So I think it's an important topic, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right.